Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Ian Schnoor. Ian is the executive director of the Financial Modeling Institute and is also founder of the Marquee Group, a leading provider of financial modeling, consulting, training, and accreditation. Ian teaches at Queen's University in Canada and is recipient of the Instructor of the Year award. Wow. Ian, thank you for coming to our interview today.
Boris, thank you for having me. It's great to meet you.
Absolutely, my pleasure too. Ian, could you perhaps tell us a short story about what brought you to your current role and what you have been up to these days?
Well, absolutely. I'll try and keep it brief. Otherwise, I could go for hours. But no, just kidding. So I'm in Canada. I did an undergraduate degree in finance, and I started my career as an investment banker. Doing investment banker, this is over 20 years ago, doing mergers and acquisitions and building lots of financial models. And I always loved building financial models, but it was very early days of financial modeling, and everyone was doing their own thing. So I always was very curious to help models get better and build them better and more organized and more disciplined. And I left investment banking and I started a training company called the Marquee Group. And at the time, there was nobody providing training courses, but there was a lot of interest. And so very, very quickly, banks all over Canada, United States, and even around the world were calling me to bring me in to run training courses to their teams, banking teams, credit teams, risk teams, private equity teams, so that they could improve their skills in valuation, financial modeling, data analytics, a lot of Excel work. And so I've been teaching financial modeling and Excel for 20 years, and we have a team now of about 20 or 25 people at the Marquee Group. Oh. Beyond that, what we discovered about 5 years ago, we started, a bunch of us, not just at Marquee, a whole bunch of people around the world started the other organization I'm with called the Financial Modeling Institute, the FMI. And the FMI is really an accreditation body where we are validating. It is not a training firm. Think of it like the CFA Institute or an accounting institute. Our job, or like GARP, our job is to test and validate people's financial modeling skills. And I'll tell you, finally on that point, about 7 or 8 years ago, a lot of employers, bankers, started putting on job postings that they want to hire people who have, an MBA or a CFA, but also people with strong financial modeling skills. And I don't know if your listeners have ever heard that, but I asked people all over the world.
Yeah, of course. We have a lot of modeling guys from banks.
For sure. And people tell me that they see that on job postings. Job postings now say, we want to hire somebody with strong financial modeling skills, but there was never any way to prove to somebody that you had strong financial modeling skills. The only thing you could do is you could say, I took a course, but simply taking a course doesn't mean anything. If you really want to get good at something, you have to work at it and practice it over and over. So we built the Financial Modeling Institute to be an independent body that builds testing and runs rigorous, challenging testing all over the world virtually so that people can prove that they have strong modeling skills. And if our level 1 accreditation is called the AFM, the Advanced Financial Modeler. And if people can build a model in our exam very proficiently, then they receive that designation. So that's what I'm doing. And I've been very passionate about financial modeling for 20 years. I just posted on my LinkedIn page, I'm putting out a free video series on my LinkedIn page on the top 10 reasons people's balance sheets don't balance when people build models. And it's always a frustrating topic for people when they can't get their balance sheet balanced. So if your listeners want to check that out, they can see some important tips on how to get balance sheets balanced. Yeah,
that's why I hired an accountant when I started my entrepreneurial career. I couldn't make it.
Yeah, but the accountants even get frustrated with it sometimes too. Yes.
Okay. So we are living now in the period of financial and even geopolitical global uncertainty and volatility. Right. As a result, it has never been harder for the C-suite to forecast the future and to make optimal business decision. So can you tell us why our audience need to know about financial modeling?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. It's a really excellent question. And I completely agree with you. The world has been shaken upside down and things are changing. Like back in 2019, if I told a client, no, you need to forecast for a global massive pandemic, it's going to shut everything down, they would say to me, what are you, crazy? Are you the most negative person? But of course, things are happening. And now we're dealing with geopolitical conflict. We're dealing with inflation like we have not seen in a long time. Very hard to forecast the future. And that's why modeling is even more important than ever before. And what I would say to people always say to me, it's really hard to forecast the future. You're right. But let's be very clear. The purpose of a financial model is not to make a crystal ball. I am not trying to say to you, Boris, in 3 years, I can tell you exactly what the revenues and costs are going to be and what your profit is going to be. That's not the purpose of a model. The purpose of a model is to allow the team and the model builder to understand all of the critical issues that impact a business and to plan for variations and deviations and to say, okay, if inflation goes to 10%, what will that do to our business? And what decisions will we have to make at that point so that we can survive? And if inflation drops, but our raw material, the price of natural gas or oil goes up or down, what does that do so I'm prepared? So the whole purpose is to say, let's understand all the dynamics of our company, all the dynamics of the business, and what do we need to do if the world unfolds in different ways so that we can be prepared, so we can be ready. And it gives you a great set of tools in your back pocket so that when certain things do happen, you have a good idea how to respond.
Mm-hmm. So what are the pitfalls? Probably most of them based on your models based on spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet, when they kind of used by many people, bring risk of its own because of complexity. Correct. And the high probability of making errors. So yeah. Other different kind of solutions to correlate with this issue?
Well, you've asked an excellent question, and there's a couple of angles to go. So first of all, forecasting is critical. We talked about why. I would say some companies use software to do forecasting, and I like to call it black box software, because what you do is you dump all your numbers into the software, and the software spits out the forecast. And that's fine. And a lot of companies do. The problem is it's hard to really understand what's driving it, and it's hard to make changes. Like you don't have much flexibility. So a lot of companies in the world are still using spreadsheets because it gives you optimal flexibility. But you're right. The problem is people don't have the skills and the discipline. People don't have the skills and the discipline to build strong models. And so many spreadsheet models are a mess. They're a disaster. They are filled with errors. And when your spreadsheet model is filled with errors, it makes it very difficult to make optimal financial decisions. So that's why we set up the accreditation and the FMI. By having an accreditation body, we know that people who get through our accreditation do have excellent modeling skills, and they can build very strong financial models. But you're right. The risk is that people don't have the right skills, and they'll make mistakes, and people won't catch them. It happens a lot.
Yeah. I work in banks, and there are some really difficult errors in Excel computation. So people bought a lot of software like SAS, another analytic software, and they use it for business modeling and for decision making.
Of course. And I would say, don't blame Excel, blame the people who built it. The problem is, have you ever seen, Boris, in a spreadsheet, a formula that was so long that it was wrapping around and around and around, right? I'm sure your listeners have seen that. It's a disaster. You should never do that. When people do that, it makes it impossible to audit, to check, to review. It makes it very difficult to know if that's working. So we teach a very particular discipline. And when people build models, we want to encourage them to keep it very logical and clean and simple. The design should be simple. The ideas can be complex, but you need to design them in a very organized, clean, simple way so that anyone else can understand it and get confidence that it's working.
So can you perhaps tell us an interesting story from your experience on how making and applying financial models help businesses not only survive, but thrive and compete?
I mean, for sure, we have, lots and lots of examples, on the Marquee Group where we do training. We also have a consulting practice. And we are helping companies build. We're building models for companies. We're helping them to improve. And we get hired all the time by companies that have very poor tools and they can't use their tools. And so they bring us in to rebuild their tools or to fix their tools. I can tell you, lots of examples. A number of years ago, a very large bank brought us in. As you can imagine, they had a big project underway. As you can imagine, banks, all the banks use, I was surprised to learn this. Banks use a lot of paper, of course, as you know, for statements. They mail people out monthly statements, their credit card statements, their bank account statements. And they told us that they spend around $100 million every year on paper, just on paper and on envelopes and on postage and on mailing and just sending statements to people in the mail or more. It was like $150 million. And they had a project to bring that down to 60 or 70 million, right? To save 60 or 70 million dollars. And so they had somebody build a tool on all the techniques and what they could do to encourage people to convert, right? Because if people convert to electronic statements, then suddenly the bank doesn't have to mail them. So they had programs and they had plans and they built a sophisticated model, but they couldn't understand it. And they weren't able to use it to run this program because the model was a disaster. The formulas were insane. They had hundreds and hundreds of cell references within every formula. So we rebuilt it for them and they're still using it. It's a very powerful tool that they're using to implement cost savings, 50, 60, 70 million dollars to help understand what they need to do to effectively bring paper out of so even silly things like that can have a big impact. But we've built, I've probably myself built 100 models for companies just to help them, give them greater insight into an understanding of an organization.
Oh, fantastic. So I would like to hear your personal opinion. What is the commonly held belief or major misconception in the financial modeling field that you strongly disagree with?
What was the question? What is the major
misconception in your field of expertise that you strongly disagree with?
A misconception. Well, there's a couple that I will share with you. One misconception is some people feel that spreadsheets shouldn't be used and that spreadsheets are dangerous. And my response to that is anything can be dangerous if it's not used properly. Any tool riding a bicycle, driving a car can be dangerous if you don't have your license, if you don't know how to do it. Same thing with a spreadsheet. So the answer is not to eliminate cars and airplanes from the planet, but rather to teach people how to use them safely and properly. And the same thing with spreadsheets. We want to make sure people have the skills to drive them, to build them, to understand them, so that you can make strong decisions. There's also misconceptions. I believe that some people feel that models should be built in a very specific way, a very type of way. And they have standards and they have very specific policies and rubrics for how models should be built. And we don't believe that either. We believe that the FMI, that there needs to be a lot of creative license, that there needs to be a lot of ability for people to follow a discipline, make sure that they're following a strong discipline around model structure and design, but still put their own personal stamp and make it feel like their own, to be creative when you build models. And I think if you have those skills, then you can achieve that.
Okay, fantastic. So what other skills are important? For example, is it math, accounting, or design skills? What are most important skills to be a good modeler?
Excellent. And I will tell you that actually, before I answer that, you reminded me in your last question, because you have a risk manager audience, we were hired recently by a large bank to build a risk model because they were using maybe your listeners can relate to this. They were using a model to evaluate the credit deals, but every banker was building their own separate model. and it had errors in it all the time. And the risk management team was very frustrated because they would catch errors in models, and it made it hard for them to approve deals. So a bank brought us in to build one uniform, cohesive tool that's protected and approved, right? To minimize. That's what we can do. To minimize the chance of errors, you have to have better tools. What disciplines are needed? Well, modeling, what I like about modeling is a very multidisciplinary skill set, which is what I like. So to be a very strong model builder, you have to understand a bunch of things. It's not just Excel. Excel is the tool we use. So you do need to understand Excel well, but you have to understand accounting. You need to understand how the numbers talk to each other. You have to understand business operations. You really have to understand the different, where does the risk come from? How does the business work? Where will the volatility be? Is there risk around their capital structure, their debt, or around their working capital? Are there tax risks, revenues? So you have to understand the operations of a business. And then one of the most important things to understand in good model building is design. How do you design data so that it flows? One thing I often talk about in my webinars is I talk about model flow. You'll appreciate that you told me you worked in IT, but a model is a technical system, and it has to be beautifully designed so that it can work and so that we can communicate it off it. And the design impacts how effectively it works. What I always tell people, every single time I talk about modeling, I tell people that a good financial model has to tell a story. And model builders don't think of themselves. Finance and accounting people and risk managers often don't think of themselves as storytellers. But I will tell you, every good spreadsheet model must tell a story, because you have to sell your idea. You have to explain why something makes sense or doesn't make sense. And if it's well designed, it will flow and you'll be able to tell a good story.
All right. So if someone who is listening to this interview would like to take one or two major takeaways from what you said, or what you know about financial modeling, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question. What I would say is that modeling has become and is becoming one of the most important skills required for all organizations and all businesses, because all it means is building a forecast to make critical business decisions. And I would say the most important business decisions today are based on the backs of financial models. All right. So one of the takeaways is modeling is important and becoming even more important. And I think the way to tackle it is to make sure that you've got the skills, to make sure you understand how to read models, review models, how to critique models, and for even some people, how to build models. And so there is a discipline that makes it very, very helpful. And what I can tell you and tell people that is, when someone does a very good job building a model, it creates enormous confidence amongst the listeners and the readers. When someone shows up at a meeting and the model is a disaster, when the spreadsheet's terrible, everyone around the table is nervous and they're uncertain and they don't know if it's right and they feel strange and they feel like they can't make a good decision. But when someone shows up and a model is clean and it's clear and it's logical and it flows and it tells a good story, wow, not only can the decision makers make a decision, but in addition, they have tremendous confidence in the builder, in the person who did the work. They think you have phenomenal skills and insights into synthesizing an organization. And that's why it's so critical to understand these skills, because it flows through every decision that gets made financially in an organization.
All right, fantastic. So I ask this question all my guests because I'm running a global risk community, and we're a community about 30,000 members, and also as a community, how can we contribute to the process of better understanding of this complex world of risk from your perspective?
Sorry, say the last part. How can you better?
How can we contribute better to the process of a better understanding this world of risk management?
Well, I would say the best way to contribute, because it is a critical piece of risk, models and modeling tools are, a very big element and a big component that we use to effectively manage and understand risk, right? Models need to capture, a good model needs to capture most or all the key risks. So the best way to contribute is to collectively boost skills and boost knowledge. Knowledge and skills are the best way to be able to contribute to the rising state and the capability to make decisions. And so how to achieve knowledge? Well, there's lots of ways to achieve knowledge and skills through training courses. But if you want, if anyone's curious to understand what we're doing at the FMI, the Financial Modeling Institute, the website is fminstitute.com. You can check it out. We actually just launched a new program called a Foundations program, our FMI Foundations. We just launched it very recently. It's for people who do not have much background in modeling. It's for people who are newer to financial modeling and they want to learn some knowledge and understand modeling concepts, and then, got a beautiful badge to prove that you're becoming more proficient. But to answer your question, the best way to contribute to increase skills, to increase your ability to make good decisions is to increase your everyone's knowledge and skill levels, which your team and your listeners all have the ability to do, because your listeners have tremendous skills already. And so that would be a great starting point.
All right, thank you. That's where all my questions. Maybe if I missed something and you would like to add that would benefit our audience, please go ahead.
No, listen, I would say, if your audience is curious, you feel free to reach out. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Again, I've got a video series. I'm doing lots of more videos coming out to help people with their modeling skills. You can follow the FMI, find out what we're doing, reach out to us. We're always happy to speak to people, to chat. If you're curious, our team is more than happy to speak. I think I was telling you before, and I don't think I mentioned this to your group, but the former CEO of the CFA Institute named Paul Smith has joined our organization at the FMI on our board. He's very passionate. And we want to kind of change and build a movement and change the way people think about models and modeling tools. So if anyone wants to learn more, reach out, follow us, check out the website, and we would be happy to help you out. I want to thank you for having me on, Boris. It's really great to meet you and speak with you.
Thank you, Ian. It's my pleasure to have you on our interview podcast. And I wish you a great success with your plans and growth in the future years.
Thank you, Boris. Great to be here.
All right.